Hey everybody, Tim Albrecht here, and thank you for listening to the YFP podcast, where each week we strive to inspire and encourage you on your own path towards achieving financial freedom. This week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Dr. Jodi, owner of the Keto Prescription. During the show, we discussed what significant health event in her own life led to pursuing a keto-based diet, why she saw an opportunity to launch her own business and keto-based practice, and the lessons she has learned in launching and growing her business, where she has helped over 2,000 patients realize the benefits of clean, medically guided keto. Before we jump into the show, I recognize that many listeners may not be aware of what the team at YFP Planning does in working one-on-one with more than 250 households in 40 plus states. YFP Planning offers fee-only high-touch financial planning that is customized to the pharmacy professional. If you're interested in learning more about how working one-on-one with a certified financial planner may help you achieve your financial goals, you can book a free discovery call by visiting yfpplanning.com. Whether or not YFP Planning's financial planning services are a good fit for you, know that we appreciate your support of this podcast and our mission to help pharmacists achieve financial freedom. Okay, let's jump into my interview with Dr. Jodi. Jodi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really excited for this interview. And Corey Jenks, a friend of YFP, a guest on the podcast, episodes 134, 196, we'll link to those in the show notes, connected the two of us. And I'm excited to have our listeners hear about your career and your entrepreneurial story. So before we get into all of that, tell us about your background, where you went into pharmacy school, when you graduated, and what ultimately drew you to the profession.
Yeah. Well, I graduated from USC, University of Southern California. This was way back in 1996. I'm actually pretty old compared to you guys. Um, and, did all of my schooling there, did my residency out there in LA as well. And I was just drawn to the profession because anything in medicine that didn't require me to have to look at anything too gross or cut anyone open is what I was pretty much interested in.
Reminds me of my journey into pharmacy. I had a guidance counselor. I said, "Hey, I love science, love math, don't want to see blood.
Yeah.
So point me in the right direction, right?" And that was in part how I got down the path of pharmacy. So
Yeah.
let's jump in to 2011. You're working at big box retail pharmacy in Hawaii, where you currently live. Tell us about your experience working there and what happened at that moment in your life and in your career that really led you to be reliant on medications. And we'll tie that to the work that you're doing now.
Yeah. It takes a special person to work retail pharmacy, in my opinion. I give them so much props because it's a grind, as so many of you out there know. And I had a horrible boss. She was a little crazy, I'm going to be honest. And I was just, it was very soul crushing for me, working in retail pharmacy. It's so busy and it's just, I didn't enjoy it at all. Um, I was going through some stuff with my family, my parents, single parent, and just at work I was miserable. My health was deteriorating pretty
Mm,
quickly, and I got diagnosed with psoriatic arthritis. And it literally was interesting because I woke up one day with it pretty much from head to toe, and they say that because it's autoimmune, it's triggered by stress.
hmm
And so just all of these, a storm of events combined that happened at one time really is what led me away from retail pharmacy, really just to fix my health, you know,
hmm
and reduce stress. I did spend a little bit of time in big pharma. I actually did spend 4 years in pharmacogenomics and
mm.
then by chance discovered keto, the keto diet.
And tell us about that discovery of what happened. We'll talk a little bit later about what exactly is the keto practice, the model, and what you're employing
Mhm.
with patients. And I think there's a lot of preconceived notions out there about keto, and we can dig into some of that. But
Yeah.
how did you get introduced to keto in that moment, which would become so critical, not only to your personal journey and your health, but also to the work that you're doing now? What was the introduction to keto? Where did that come from?
Yeah. Um, One of my first degree relatives actually had a massive heart attack and almost died. His LAD, his artery was 99% occluded. And just in casually mentioning it to a colleague who's a pediatric neurologist, he was like, dude, you should put your dad on keto. And I was like, what's a keto? I hadn't even heard of it. And he goes, I know
Hmm.
how you are. He goes, you should research it. So that just set me down the whole rabbit hole. I mean, YouTube, books, everything. And as I was doing my own learning, it was interesting because all of these things that I had learned in school way back when started to resurface. And it made me realize, like, oh my gosh, we are completely practicing medicine backwards. Just the whole Western model of do labs, look at a number, write a prescription, right?
Hmm.
There's not a lot of thought into that outside of, okay, am I going to use a torvastatin or simvastatin? You know what I mean? Like, that's
Hmm.
the degree of thought that goes into medicine right now. And so I decided in that moment that I was going to try the keto diet. I was going to put my relative on it as well and do it together to support him. And in
Hmm.
doing that, my autoimmune condition completely went into remission.
Hmm.
And where I had been injecting myself weekly with Enbrel for 13 years, I was now completely off of it. And it was just mind blowing for me.
It's interesting, when you say, Jodi, do labs, look at a number, write a prescription. I
Yeah.
was reflecting on this recently because I think, for all the modern revelations that have come from medicine, which is incredible, and you worked in the industry, a lot of the research and development was done, and the advances that have been made over the last 75 years and
Yeah.
much shorter, is really, really incredible. But I think we have forgotten about all of the time before any of that even happened,
Yeah.
and I think one of the things that I'm learning more and more on my journey, and I think keto here is a good example, or the principles of keto, or looking at other cultures and medicine, and how, there's thousands of years of experience. And when I think about the PharmD training and folks that are in school for 6 or 8 years, we get very little, if any, on the foundation prior to some of the first medications in the 1900s. And we
Yeah.
get a whole lot. And obviously the advancements that have come in the last century, which have played a very, very critical role. But I think we often may be blind to some of those other opportunities and open to some of those other opportunities for how we may look at, treating conditions. You mentioned kind of a backwards approach of do the labs, look at the number, write a prescription. When you say keto,
Mm-hmm.
help me. I'm a person that I would say is probably lay understanding of keto. I've dabbled a little bit in keto diets and
Yeah.
books, and I have found some of the science fascinating, but I
Mm-hmm.
have found there's a lot of opinions out there. There's a lot of definitions about carb intakes and monitoring of values. Like when you say a keto based diet, what tell us more? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Um, so let's quickly differentiate. Most of what you see on social media, I would call dirty keto or lazy keto. It's like tons of bacon, huge burgers, everything's covered in cheese. And that, in my professional opinion, is actually not keto. So the definition of keto is a low carb, moderate protein, high healthy fat diet. And healthy fat does not include eating a lot of cheese. The problem is that everyone is getting these ratios wrong of the
Yeah.
carb, the protein, and the fat on their plate. And so it's giving keto, which I mean, I see it every day in my own private practice, is it has the power to literally reverse so many medical conditions from head to toe. Um, it's just it's important that the right messaging about the diet get out there, and that's why organizations like the one Corey Jenks and I belong to,
Hmm.
is on the leading edge of helping to define and validate this as a legitimate medical approach because it works. It really works.
And so I find it really interesting that it's one thing to try something in your own health or for the health of a family member, as you mentioned, to help keep them accountable and support them as well, and to see the positive impact and the effects. It's another thing to kind of share that story and that word with other people, get them excited. It's a whole nother level to say, I'm going to make a business out of this. I'm going to start a practice and I'm going to begin to really implement the
Yeah.
transformation I'm having in my own life, but also be able to help serve other folks. And it's another, I think, great examples. We've shared other stories on this podcast of pharmacists that are using their degree in somewhat of a non-traditional way.
Yeah.
But one of the things I'm really passionate about is that the PharmD is an entry point to many, 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 many different pathways and opportunities. And I think you've built out a really unique niche in practice. So my question for you is,
Hmm.
what led you to make that transition from, hey, this is really having a positive impact in my own life, to I'm going to take a huge step forward and actually start my own practice?
Yeah, which at my age, right, I'm 49 this year. That's a risky thing. It's a huge career pivot. Um, Long story short, I started making these videos on Facebook about keto, how to do keto. And what I did was I did 30 live videos in 30 days.
Wow.
And
Okay.
it was something that it was like a contest that I was part of. And I decided to do keto as my topic. And I amassed like a pretty big following in that 30-day span. And as people started messaging me and asking questions, that's what made me realize like, wow, I think there needs to be an actual like keto clinic, you know?
Mm.
So luckily for me, Hawaii, I'm out in Hawaii. If people don't know, that is a smaller place. I've been in different facets of the healthcare industry for many years out here. And so I know a lot of the right people. And I met with the head of Blue Cross Blue Shield Hawaii and I said, hey, this is what I want to do, but I'm a pharmacist and we are not recognized as providers out here. How do I do
Mhm.
this legally? And they literally sat down with me one day and helped me figure it out. And
Mm.
really, all I needed to do was partner with an MD, right? So I could bill incident to this physician, write up a collaborative practice agreement, and I got picked up just through word of mouth. People mentioned it to this one GI doctor who I'm no longer with, but that was how the whole thing started. And now I'm with a cardiologist, and she is amazing. Like, she has really embraced it. We just sent out a flyer to all the docs in the state of Hawaii that we are the Hawaii's first cardio metabolic clinic, and we're using the keto diet to basically reverse metabolic syndrome in patients. And it's a win 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 all the way around.
So the business model there is partnering with a physician. You
Yep.
mentioned first an intestinal doc, now with a cardiologist.
Hmm.
Incident to collaborative practice agreements.
Yes.
And then I'm sure there's, you don't need to share details, but I'm sure there's some type of a revenue share with incident two. You look at overhead expenses, other things at the clinic, but you're operating in tandem with a physician incident
Hmm.
to collaborative practice agreement. Is that right?
Yep. That's the model.
Okay.
And I mean, just I think pharmacists should know this because, you know, um, our pharmacist association out here, I'm co-chair of our government affairs committee this year, and we are introducing a bill into our legislative season at the beginning of next year to be recognized and reimbursed as providers in the state of Hawaii. And we're using my clinic as one of the main examples of really the depth and the breadth of what pharmacists are trained to do clinically, and how in something like diabetes, we make such a huge impact because only my clinic in the entire state is reversing diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people I
Mm-hmm.
don't manage diabetes. When you come to see me, we're going to reverse that sucker. Do you know what I mean? Like
Love
I
it.
don't play around with that.
Love
So
the
yeah.
audacious goal and the vision
Yeah.
behind that.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
that relationship with Blue Cross Blue Shield is going to become all that more important, right? As you guys are able
Yeah.
to move that provider status stuff forward.
Yeah, so that'll hopefully, and what happens is the insurance companies will deposit my reimbursements into the cardiologist's account, and all she needs to do is cut me a check for that.
Yep.
It's pretty straightforward.
So I don't want to gloss over. I talk with a lot of pharmacists that have really cool ideas. It
Hmm.
could be for a side hustle, it could be for an aspiration, of a business, or it could be a product, a service based thing. But very few actually start. And I always talk with individuals about, we get paralyzed in the big vision, we get overwhelmed. There's fears, there's insecurities, whole lots of reasons of why, but very few are willing to take that first step to say, hey, I'm passionate about this and I'm going to see where it goes. And it's okay that there's some unknown territory ahead of me. So when you say I put myself out there, I did 30 videos in 30 days.
Mhm.
I met with Blue Cross Blue Shield, like those are a big deal, right? And so
Yeah.
my question for you is what led you to the mindset? What led you to the willingness to take those steps, even knowing you mentioned that in your opinion it was somewhat of a risky move, knowing that hey, maybe this succeeds, maybe it doesn't succeed. Like, what allowed you to have that motivation and to take that step forward or those first few steps forward?
It was, well, of course, it was my own experience with the keto diet and what it did for me, right? And having the
Mm-hmm.
ability to tell that story. Um, and because of all the videos I had done on Facebook, this was 5, 6 years ago, and people taking my advice, or just I was saying, don't eat this, try to eat these things. And then I was getting all these testimonials through
Mm,
DMs of girls who had been deemed infertile are all of a sudden pregnant, because they took the advice that I had shared and all this stuff. Like, I started to see how much this would impact people. And then it's of course thinking it through, having mentors, right? Um,
mm-hmm.
what are the pros and cons? What is this going to cost me? And then having a basic business plan is really important too, because you've got to understand the risks. And I'm going to be honest with you, I was doing pharmacogenomics at the time, and which I loved, by the way. That I can't wait to start doing that in my office too, eventually. But I was doing really well, and I put away enough money in the bank to cover my mortgage and all of my expenses for 12 months. And I made sure I had that in the bank before I did this, just in case it didn't pan out.
I'm so glad you bring that up because obviously, this is a financial podcast and one
Right.
of the things I like to ask aspiring entrepreneurs or folks that are looking to make this transition is I think for many pharmacists, good reason could be debt loads, could be other expenses and things. There's somewhat of a golden handcuff of being able to take a quote risk and make a transition. And so that was your strategy. 12 months of savings, give yourself some cushion so that you could
Yeah.
really approach the business with confidence. Is that right?
Yeah, because when you're now billing insurances and you're working through all the medical billing, and Medicare doesn't reimburse right away. Sometimes it takes 3 months. Like, these are all the things that
Yeah.
you have to think that pharmacists don't realize, because if you're not functioning and billing as a provider, and
Yep.
you work in a salaried position with benefits, and you would never realize that,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So there's just a lot of pieces to think about. And it's interesting because at Low Carb USA, they also go by the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners. They have their annual conference every August in San Diego. And the talk that I'm giving on stage this year is the 4 pillars of a successful low carb clinical practice.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, Tim, my hope is that a lot of pharmacists think about attending this conference or attending it at some point in their career, because this model of PharmDs working with MDs in the low carb space, and MDs are looking for PharmDs to partner with,
Mm-hmm.
is like one of the greatest segues that we can get into to get out of the pharmacy and get into clinical practice. And like I was saying earlier, I graduated a long time ago, and I'm dealing with every disease, state, medical condition from head to toe now. And it was amazing how much of what I had learned came flooding back. You know what I mean? And just
Mm-hmm.
in diabetes management and all of that. It, I tell people that I'm the luckiest pharmacist in the world, because I have the opportunity to use every single skill that I learned in all of my schooling and all of my residency in my own business now, and
Mm-hmm.
the ability to help so many people. So it's a
Yeah.
lot of
The
fun.
transformative impact on others, right? I mean,
Yep.
that's awesome. W- Pharmacists love frameworks, and so your 4 pillars really resonates with me. I think that partly why I asked you the question of what led you to take those first steps is that even when there's a strong motivation, often we want something a little bit more. And so a few things you said that really stood out to me. Number one is that strong why and motivation. You mentioned your personal experiences,
Hmm.
that sense of obligation to serve and help other people.
Yep.
The second thing I heard you say was really some mentors that could be a sounding board that could, provide guidance. And I think probably some accountability that was there as well. And then the third thing was really having a strong business plan
Hmm.
to be able to understand, moving this from idea to projections is a really important step, right? Because I think we
Absolutely.
can all become somewhat naive and optimistic about our idea, but rubber meets the road in the Excel document.
Yeah.
And pairing that with mentors to say, like, where'd you come up with this number? That sounds
Yes.
great, but like, how are you actually going to generate that kind of revenue? Oh, okay, I got to get a level deeper, a level deeper, a level deeper. Well, what's that going to look like cash flow for the next flow? Oh, I need to have, some cash flow saved up because of delays of billing and insurance. I mean, these are the things that for folks to have an idea, so much wisdom there in what you shared. And I want to come back to the importance of a strong why. I wrote a blog article recently talking about how your why has to be greater than your motivation. Your
Yeah.
why has to be greater than your motivation because there are days, weeks, seasons in business when things are going to be up and things are going to be down. And I really believe the why is the anchor. And I'm looking behind you as we're recording this, and you have a sign up that said, our patients will lose 10,000 pounds and stop 300 medications in 365 days. That's incredible. I mean, that is a guiding anchor of what you're doing. How important is that vision to you to motivate you to keep going during those seasons that might be challenging?
Yeah, that's my annual mission statement. It's always my goal every January 1. For the last 3 years, I've come very close every single time. And it's okay if I don't hit it exactly, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
shoot, last year I think we did 8,800 pounds collectively and 265 medications. But
It's
when you
awesome.
look at those metrics compared to what you see in every other medical practice out there, this is the type of data that the payers are going to need someday to see the value that our profession brings. And so, kind of back to Y's statement, it's not only about what this can do for patients. I'm also personally working very hard to transform our profession because I
Mm.
think if we don't, it's going to die out pretty quickly. It's a
Mm-hmm.
very pivotal time right now, for pharmacists. And so I allow pharmacy students to rotate through my clinic. They do rotations. And something, you're talking about framework and pillars. If there's a word of advice I could give to a lot of the younger pharmacists out there is pharmacy can be very siloed. Okay. You've got MDs, you've got lab, you've got
Mm-hmm.
your pharmacist, you've got nursing. And a lot of times these silos don't talk to each other. You have to be that pharmacist that is knows how to go out and network. And very honestly, it was time I spent in big pharma in different positions that taught me how to do that. And that came in so handy when I was thinking of starting this clinical practice. Having the
Mm-hmm.
ability to bounce things off of all of these different areas of specialty in healthcare and having connection is such a critical part of being able to move forward because you've got to get buy-in. You've got to get
That's right.
buy-in from key people.
That's right. Yeah, and
Mm,
building alliances, having physician
yes.
advocates, having relationships with payers, having folks that can help speak on your behalf. So when you're introducing a bill in Hawaii, you've got physician
Yeah.
advocates that are speaking to that. So I'm really hearing two big buckets of what you're working on. One is the practice, the business, helping individual patients, and then the other is really the impact on the profession and
Yes.
really elevating what pharmacists can do as providers.
Hmm.
Sure, that helps the business, but ultimately that expanded scope is going to allow for expanded services and a greater impact on patients. So my question for you is, how important has your involvement been? You mentioned a role in the state association. How important has your involvement been in the state association and that work in terms of the connection to what you're trying to build and do in a practice? Because I think we've lost some of the juice
Oh, yeah.
behind the value of associations, and I am able to sit firsthand, on the leadership team of the Ohio Pharmacist Group and really see the value at the state level. And so I'm curious to hear your perspective there as well.
Oh man, I envy you. You're with Ohio because you got a lot of great things accomplished out there. Hawaii is so far behind, and we are a dying association out here. I'm going to be very honest with you.
Mm,
Um, it what we're working on this year for the next legislative session, um, and it really at the end of the day, it always boils down to just three of us that are doing the brunt of the work,
yeah,
and
yeah,
me calling on every representative and senator in the state that I've known or grown up with. Again, it's that networking thing. Partnering with professional organizations like the American Diabetes Association to get their testimony of support at the right time, beginning of next year. It's all of this is so intertwined. It's fascinating to me, and if we don't fix it, I fear what's going to happen. And it's so interesting because I see a lot of this where we're on our monthly call, and it's that problem where the hospital pharmacists only know hospital pharmacy things, and the community
yeah,
pharmacists only know community pharmacy things, but they don't necessarily know people outside of that.
yeah,
So we keep hitting this wall. Um, and I think it's because I took such an unconventional path in my career that I have all of these connections, and I know who to talk to, at least if we're trying to figure out
hmm
how to do something. I and I would strongly encourage people to just get out of the pharmacy. Get out of the pharmacy. I love what you're doing, by the way, your podcast, and you're really good
Oh,
at it.
thank you,
Like,
thank you.
to get people to think beyond counting pills and doing IVs is so important
Hmm
because we're poised. I don't know if our pharmacists realize how perfectly poised we are right now to make a giant pivot. But we have to
Yes,
collectively do this. It can't just be three of us. Do you know what I mean?
absolutely. Yeah, we have more than 300,000 pharmacists across the country that are positioned in every community across the country
Yeah.
that is trusted by the public. Like we are perfectly positioned to have a grand impact on the health and outcomes of the country. And I think your comment about, being able to kind of get out of our silos is so important because at the end of the day, like we need to talk with the payers and the legislators with
Yes.
one voice, right? We can't be having a conversation with a payer or legislator about this from a community pharmacy, this from a hospital pharmacy. We're not big enough to start to splice and segment those things. We have to have one voice of
Yep.
what we're trying to advance and do for the population. And obviously, when it comes to the payer perspective, can we advance the outcomes and the work that obviously you've been able to do in your own practice? So 8,000 plus pounds, I heard you say in this past year, 250 plus meds that you were able to deprescribe. What does that look like in terms of number of patients that you've touched? I'm trying to get a scope of what the week to week, year to year looks like. How many patients have you reached through the clinic that you've established?
Yeah. So in just under 3 years, I've now seen over 2,000 people. I see roughly 40 to 50 patients a week. I I try not to work more than 4 days a week in clinic, and the reason why is because I'm dealing with food and eating behaviors and a lot of food addictions because sugar is in everything now. I I do quite a bit of psychology in each
Hmm
appointment, whether I want to
Yeah,
or not. And after 14 patients in a day, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot,
that's a
it can
lot.
be very draining. So my
Yeah.
average day is 12 to 14 patients. Um, and it usually takes about 6 appointments for me to teach them everything.
Yeah.
And really the people that come to see me, they are like ready to make a change. A lot of them have already had gastric bypass surgery. A lot of them have gone through different weight management programs, and they're ready. They get it. And that's why through my social media outlets, I'm very thoughtful and I'm very intentional of the words that I use and the vibe that I put out,
Mm.
because it's only those types of patients that I'm trying to attract.
Yeah.
My saying is, I don't want lazy and I don't want crazy. Those people can go somewhere else. I want the people that really want to change their health.
Yeah, it reminds me of the readiness to change spectrum that we all learned about in pharmacy school, right? Whether it's weight loss, tobacco cessation, there has to be a readiness and a mindset, and obviously you're helping to facilitate that change there as well. What has been one of the more challenging or a couple of the challenging things
Mm.
of running and growing your own business? If you think about the scope of things, from you're setting up collaborative practice agreements, you're working with payers, you're trying to figure out the financials of growing the business, the referrals, the provider relationships, your own mindset as a business owner. What has been one or two of the most challenging things as you've grown your business?
Oh man, I already know the answer to this. Okay, the first thing is, you guys are gonna love this. Two doctors who run weight loss clinics filed a formal complaint against me with the state of Hawaii
Oh, geez.
that what I'm doing is fraudulent because I am not allowed to call myself doctor. I am not a doctor. And so they I guess they were so threatened by what I
I was
was
gonna say,
doing.
fear anyone fearful?
I
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that sucked because I had to luckily have a great attorney, and just having to put all the I mean, come on. Like
Hmm.
we're farm Ds.
Yeah.
But they were so upset that I was on social media, and my patients, they call me Dr. Jodi. And I like
Hmm.
Dr. Jodi instead of Dr. Nishida. To me, it's less formal. It feels more personal. So that was the first thing that really kind of threw me. And my attorney laughed. He goes, "Well, Jodi, this is how you know you're doing something right.
That's
Because
right.
if no one's paying attention, that means you're not making an impact." The second thing that happened that I want, hopefully, people can learn from this is that first doctor I mentioned, the GI doctor that I partnered with. He ended up stealing over $50,000 of my reimbursement.
Oh, geez.
So the incident to billing model,
Yeah.
right, is they
Hmm.
deposit it in his account. All he has to do is write a check. Well, he stopped writing checks and was really such a jerk about it because, and this guy makes like 2.5 million a year. I remember he looked me in the eye one day and he goes, "What are you going to do? Sue me? You can't
Oh,
afford it.
geez.
I have all your money." And so, but, but if that didn't happen, if that hardship didn't happen, remember
Yeah.
now, luckily I had put enough money away in the bank for 1 year,
Yeah.
and that floated me during this very difficult time. That led me to the cardiologist. So everything happened for a reason, but that's a valuable lesson. And that's why I'm working so hard on getting us that provider status here, is so that it doesn't
Yeah.
happen to anyone else.
Yeah. What's really interesting, and I want to call out for a moment, is your mindset through that difficult situation, right? Because I think that someone could look at that and say, victim mentality, right? I saved for 12 months and, I was going to start this business, and here I am, this first big challenge. You know what? Like, I'm just not cut out for this. This isn't going to work out. I'm just going to
Yep.
fold it in, get my paycheck back, and keep moving. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think the financial foundation helped you be able to weather that storm. But you
Yes.
also, despite those funds in the bank, you also had to have the resilience through that scenario to
Yeah.
say, my mission and my why is greater than my motivation and the situation that I'm going through in this moment, right? Because you knew that you had a bigger mission to serve and ultimately patients to take care of.
And it's not just me, right? As pharmacists, we tend to focus a lot on medications, but our value in actual disease state management and what we do for people's lives, I think we lose sight of that,
Yeah,
so many years after we graduate. But we can't do that because we're really good at what we do, whether we realize it or not.
that's right.
You're
Yep.
not going to realize it in retail pharmacy very often, but if you can find these little niches, we are so valuable. I mean, really, we are.
So, Jody, if we fast forward to 2027, 5 years from now,
Hmm.
right now you've got this bold vision. You're obviously making great progress towards 10,000 pounds, 300 medications that you're going to stop. What does success look like for you 5 years from now as you continue on this journey?
Oh, I honestly, I also do a lot of restaurant collaborations here in Hawaii. So I help them keto-fy menu
Oh, that's cool.
items. Yeah, or
Hmm.
have a keto section. And for me, that's the real fun part of what I do outside of the office. Um, I really would love to have my own little keto cafe. It's more so like I can just hang out there too. But I think it would go really well, and I think I've built enough of a brand and reputation out here. But that would just be
Yeah.
something fun. So the clinic aspect, growing that, bringing more PharmDs on board, number
Yep.
one, so that I don't have to be in the office all the time, and then I can build this additional thing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love that.
is
And
a
obviously
dream for
the
me.
advocacy efforts you mentioned, being able to train up the next generation of pharmacists on this
Yep.
podcast. I know you're going to motivate others that are out there to consider options in their own journey as well. So I love that. And if you get the Keto Cafe up and running, I'm making a trip out to Hawaii. So
Please,
count,
yeah, come out.
count it. I've never been. So this would be my first trip
Oh,
out there.
you gotta come out.
Well, this has been fun. You've been an inspiration to me, and I'm so glad Corey connected the two of us. Where can folks go to learn more about you and to follow your journey?
Yeah, my website is the prescription.com. I'm on Instagram at the keto prescription. You can also type that into YouTube, and I have a bunch of videos up there that talk about different things. I talk a lot about food and the origin of the food that we're eating nowadays. So it's pretty interesting. You guys should educate yourself on that because
Mm-hmm.
the food industry is pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking time, especially with the time zone difference and early morning for you. So thank you so
Yeah,
much,
thank
and
you.
looking forward to following your journey. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Same to you.
As we conclude this week's podcast, an important reminder that the content on this show is provided to you for informational purposes only and is not intended to provide and should not be relied on for investment or any other advice. Information in the podcast and corresponding material should not be construed as a solicitation or offer to buy or sell any investment or related financial products. We urge listeners to consult with a financial advisor with respect to any investment. Furthermore, the information contained in our archived newsletters, blog posts, and podcasts is not updated and may not be accurate at the time you listen to it on the podcast. Opinions and analyses expressed herein are solely those of your financial pharmacist unless otherwise noted and constitute judgments as of the dates published. Such information may contain forward-looking statements which are not intended to be guarantees of future events. Actual results could differ materially from those anticipated in the forward looking statements. For more information, please visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/disclaimer. Thank you again for your support of the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast. Have a great rest of your week.